Hi, everybody. I am Ron Cantor, and this is Speak Up based on Proverbs 31:8, where it tells us to use our voice for those who don't have one. And that's really what we have been doing here. I'm going to be real honest with you. I feel foolish making another video about Jeremiah Johnson, but we have to see this through till the end. There needs to be accountability. My computer right now has dozens of testimonies of people who suffered at their altar church, all different types of testimony, but they all line up. There's a similar narrative. Don't speak up. Any type of disagreement is gossip. People who leave have been sifted by Satan. It's cultish. And at least that's what I'm seeing here. So today what I want to do is Jeremiah has shared his explanation regarding the boxing gloves in the suitcase alleged vision that he had. Just a quick shout out to Joshua Harris. He is the one who made the original video on this, and because he did that, we now have access to at least a little bit of this video. It has been deleted, but again, I just wanted to say thank you to Joshua.
I was in prayer this week for our time together this morning, and the Lord began to give me a vision of a church full of people that had red boxing gloves on, and everybody had a suitcase.
Jeremiah has been accused by several different people of plagiarism. There was J.D. Hall back in 2020. I want to encourage you and go see the video that Wanda Alger did with Nancy Nope yesterday, because it's really powerful. I mean, she was an insider. She wanted to stay inside, and she finally got to the point where she could not ignore the dishonesty, the plagiarism, the lies. And so she spoke up, and honestly, I was deeply, deeply moved. I'm going to put that video link in the description. A couple months ago, on February 4th, there was a meeting at the altar church, a Zoom call that was between staff, elders, and deacons, if I understand, about 30 people total. And in that, Jeremiah explains all the allegations that came from the Jake Cale letter that was sent out. Jake Cale is a former associate who went online and said that he could no longer endorse Jeremiah based on the allegations, based on what he, after his investigation, just realized were true. And so there was some fallout because apparently Jake was very close to the community there. And so that's the purpose of this meeting, to deal with that fallout. And it begins with Jeremiah explaining. He's got a written statement. He's explaining the plagiarism, explaining the fake prophecy. Now, before we go on, I do want to say this. I am uncomfortable with the idea of Zoom meetings being recorded unless everybody knows. People need to be free. And I do not make a habit of playing, and I don't know if this is private. Maybe everybody knew that it was being recorded. I don't know. But I don't make a habit of playing recordings where I'm not sure if everybody knows that they were recorded. The only exception would be if a leader is lying, if they are gaslighting, if they're doing it in a private setting to try and this is, sadly, this is what happens in cover-up culture, is that you get one set of people that you think you can manipulate over here, and you lie to them. You convince them that you didn't do anything wrong. Everything is okay. But then you've got another group over here. They have a little bit more information. So you have a whole nother set of lies. And what happens is eventually it all comes out. Eventually the lies begin to fall in on themselves and the house begins to collapse. And I think that is what is happening here, because each time Jeremiah tries to explain how he ends up using other people's information, but it's not his fault, it becomes ridiculous. And this time it really does. So again, I am uncomfortable playing video that people are not aware they're being recorded. But if you as a leader, as a pastor, are going to go into an elders meeting or a deacons meeting or a staff meeting and you are going to lie to those people, then I'm sorry. If it's recorded, it's going to be played, and it should. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of background to this whole situation. In January 2024, Jeremiah Johnson preaches a message on the stage. You see there's a couple suitcases, and there are some red boxing gloves which he puts on, and he begins to explain that the suitcases are connected to foster children, because when they go into foster care, they often do not unpack their suitcases because they fear that they're not going to be there very long. So why unpack? And then the boxing gloves, represents the hurt and pain that people in churches have because of the wounds that they have suffered. There's, anger and hurt and maybe bitterness. The problem is this. He says the title of this morning's message is The Gift of Manasseh. And then he goes on to say that he's never preached it and he has never heard of it before.
Title of this morning's message is called The Gift of Manasseh. I've never preached it. I've never heard it.
And therein lies the problem, is that there is a young lady named Anna Golden who has a song about Manasseh. And in the intro to that song, she talks about her pastor preaching a message where he had on stage suitcases and red boxing gloves. And it was the same explanation about foster kids not unpacking. It was verbatim. It was identical.
And Pastor O was speaking a message, and he had boxing gloves on and a suitcase. He was talking about a lot of times the foster children, when they get adopted, they don't unpack their suitcase even after they're adopted. Seems to change. And then he had the boxing gloves because he said, everybody's ready and we're on the defense because someone hurt me before. And here we are standing in church with a suitcase and boxing gloves, and the Lord just...
So either it is an incredible miracle, which I would then feel really bad for Jeremiah, because it means that God is giving a guy who has been accused multiple times of plagiarism a miracle in which he's going to get accused again for plagiarism. Of course, I don't believe it's a miracle. I believe it is plagiarism. In fact, we're going to prove that today because Jeremiah himself does admit that he did hear about it. This is not new to him. So when he says he's never heard about it before, that is a lie. And we will see in just a second. But in any case, the woman, Anna, goes on to explain that her dad comes. She's in a new church and she's really, I guess she's going through a hard time. I've not heard the whole introduction. And she's in a good place. And her dad comes to her, encourage her, and says it's like, Manasseh, Joseph, went through a very difficult time in his father's household. Brothers sold him into slavery. He gets accused of rape, goes to jail, but then he becomes the second most powerful person in the world. And his first son is called Manasseh, which Jeremiah inaccurately says means forgetting the pain of your father's household. That is a more of a theological inference that we get. In the Hebrew culture, you would give somebody a name that would be a hint of something greater. So it doesn't mean forgetting the pain in your father's household. It just comes from the word that can mean forget, Manasseh. So you don't have one little tiny word, Manasseh, that means an entire sentence. It simply comes from to cause to forget. And so that's why he named him that, because Joseph, was able to forget the pain of his father's household. And Anna Golden's father is encouraging her with these words that this is a new season for her. And so he takes that and he gives the title of the message. It's actually further proof that it was plagiarized, because he's literally repeating word for word what Anna Golden is saying her father said regarding Joseph and his name.
And the Lord gives him two sons. And the first is named Manasseh, and it means to forget. It means to forget the pain of my father's household.
During this process, he has a son named Manasseh. And the meaning of Manasseh is this: God has caused me to forget the pain of my father's household.
He even, and this is where it is my experience that people who are dishonest, that they eventually, they get careless, they get reckless. And Jeremiah plays the song of Anna Golden at the end of the service as part of the altar call, proving that he has heard the song. Now, here's the problem, is that some people that were in the congregation that day were so moved by the song that they got the name, they got the artist, they went home, they found it, they listened, and then they listened to the intro, and they were like, wait a minute. And by the way, it's about 4 months apart. shares this in August 2023, and Jeremiah, it goes on YouTube in August 2023, and Jeremiah sharing this in January 2024. So was that 4 months? And some people go home that are in the congregation and they're like, whoa, this introduction is exactly what Jeremiah said he saw in a vision. Did I not mention that? Yes. He did not say he developed this message last week in his study. He said, I was in prayer this week and I had a vision. And in this vision that God gave me, this mystical, powerful experience, God showed me boxing gloves and he showed me a suitcase, and it's connected to foster kids. So it's not that he went up and looked. This is a revelation he is having. And these congregants are confused because the revelation that he's having is exactly identical to what the pastor shares in Anna Golden's introduction to her song Manasseh. It looks to them like he stole it. And this is a pattern. This is a pattern. Again, if you listen to the video, Nancy says that several times he has taken things that she has shared and then shared them publicly in his own name. For instance, in September of last year, they were in a prayer meeting, and there was another brother named Chris, who is a deacon, and Chris and Nancy prophesies something. Chris really jumps into that and prays or prophesies along the same lines. And then, if I understand correctly, within 54 minutes at the end of that prayer meeting, Jeremiah is posting something online in his name that is strangely similar to what they prophesied and prayed. Now, it would have been fine if he said, hey, I just came out of a prayer meeting and these powerful things came forth, but he makes it appear like it's his own revelation. And these people are not saying that they feel robbed or that they're angry that they didn't get credit. I mean, if you need credit for your prophecy, then that is not mature. You know, we don't own any of this stuff. Everything belongs to God. But that is not what I'm hearing from Nancy, and it's not what I'm hearing from Chris. What I'm hearing is a concern about the behavior of their pastor, that he would do something unethical like that. And again, he has been accused of this type of behavior over and over and over, and it makes you wonder if he is not capable of coming up with original content, if he really is prophetic, or if he is just taking things, learning behavior of what prophets might do. I don't know. I don't know Jeremiah well enough to say that, but I can say that the evidence is deeply concerning. Okay, so these people come home, and it's several people over time that discover that this message that he preached, and by the way, that message is now gone. It's off the internet. It was taken off the internet when Joshua Harris exposed this, and I guess he put up a note that it was going to be premiered. Sometimes you do that on YouTube where you'll know an hour or a day in advance that this person's going to be talking about X. And so when Jeremiah or his team or somebody in that orbit saw that Joshua Harris was going to be exposing the fact that Jeremiah took this message from someone and then pretended that it was a vision, they deleted it. Now, if you have nothing to hide, right? If there's a logical explanation, then you don't take down the video. You come up and say, hey, I know some people are confused. Let me explain what happened. You take down the video if you don't want people to see it because it exposes that you've done something wrong. Okay, so now there is this leadership meeting on February 4th, and one of the people there wants to bring this up. And I have to really applaud this woman for her boldness, that she's willing, because from what I understand, this is not an atmosphere where people are encouraged to share honestly. They're encouraged to adopt narratives from the leadership, such as, again, people who have left have been sifted by Satan. They're not following God. They're going to miss the revival. But they're not encouraged to share freely. And so, in fact, Chris, the deacon, when he brings up this whole issue of plagiarism, I am told that he was, because he brought it up in front of the leaders and elders and staff, which is actually where you should be able to bring these things up. The issue of Jeremiah taking the word that him and Nancy had in September and then 54 minutes later putting it online in his own name. He was actually rebuked by Jeremiah's wife, Morgan. Now, she wasn't yelling at him, but she was saying, you shouldn't have talked to Nancy about this. You should have come to us directly. Here's what leaders need to I understand this as a leader. I'm an elder in my congregation. I've been a senior pastor. I've had every imaginable position within a local congregational setting except worship leader. And I should have been, because I'm kidding. There's a good reason I wasn't the worship leader. But I understand the inner workings of congregational life. And if the senior leader is not going to allow for two leaders, Chris and Nancy, to process, he wasn't going to her to gossip. He was going to her to say, I am confused about this. A man that I love, a man that I look up to, that I honor as a prophet, as our apostolic leader. It looks like he took our word, what we prayed, what we prophesied, and then, well, for lack of a better word, he stole it and then put it online in his own name. And he was asking Nancy, am I crazy? That is completely acceptable. That is normal. You have to give leaders the opportunity. This idea that no. You broke Matthew 18 when you went to Nancy. No, he didn't. What he did not want to do was to go to Jeremiah, which could be scary. He did not want to go to Jeremiah over nothing. So he's saying, Nancy, this happened several months ago, and I didn't say anything about it. But you know what? Now we got Jake Cale coming out and saying that these allegations of plagiarism are true. And this am I crazy? That is the right thing to do. Leaders should be able to have discussions without the senior leader there. And if you are so insecure as a senior leader that you're not going to allow for that, then you probably should not be in pastoral ministry. Now, again, I understand what gossip is. I understand that it can get out of hands, but you've got, particularly in a crisis, particularly when there are all these allegations of plagiarism, you must let your leaders discuss. You must let your elders right now without you in the room. In fact, Jeremiah needs to recuse himself completely in these discussions and allow his elders to govern without him in the room. But I digress. So let's keep moving on. So this woman, she shares in this meeting of 30 or so elders, deacons, staff members, her concerns about Jeremiah's message because she heard Anna Golden's intro. We used AI to change the texture of her voice so she could not be identified.
I will say this. In 2024, there was a message that Jeremiah preached on, and at the end of that message, he played a song, and I was like, wow, I love this song. I gotta find out, like, who wrote this. So I went to research who the person was, because we just played it at the altar, and I was just blessed as well by the message. It was the message with the suitcase and the boxing glove. And when I went to research who wrote the song, looking at her stuff, I never heard of her before as an artist. So I was just scrolling her Instagram page and I came across a clip where she gave a testimony that was exactly similar to what was preached at Funded. Now, I have to be honest, in that moment, I was like, take this message. Like, it looked verbatim, right? But I was like, you know what? I just dismissed it and just continued on, When this ish, I don't even know who this Jake guy is. I wasn't here when he came. But because this stuff is for all around, people know that I attend the church. Somebody said this to me. Of course, I'm like, is this so I have to be transparent with my heart. Like, I'm like, is this real? Like, is this really a thing? Because prior to all of this, I never felt that. I know your characters, under your leadership. Other than that situation, I've never even thought twice to even question your integrity as leaders. But I will say, when that, obviously things will start coming through my mind. So I'm just being honest, because I feel like one thing that when he prophesied to me during the conference, he said that this is your safe place. I shared that with you two. The Lord told me that when I came here. So this is our community. And I feel safe in here. And I want to be able to be my heart. And I prayed as well, too. So trust me, I'm like, I know this is, the enemy is a lot going on in the body. Everywhere. God, this is not about pointing fingers. This is our leader. All of this is happening. Lord, how can we help? How can we serve? But also I want to be transparent as well. So that's where I was. So I was so grateful that you guys called this meeting tonight. So grateful because that showed me another level of your hearts and where you guys are. I'm like, okay, God, this is awesome. You know, we're gonna work through this together, you know, as a community, as a family. I don't want to just take things that I just hear, you know, firsthand from people. And I've never been that type of person. So I learn people on my own, not by things in the internet, all of that kind of stuff. I don't even go looking for that kind of stuff. It comes, that's, you know, I'll deal with it. But other than that, so I just wanted to share that that's where, you know, my heart has felt me.
Okay, so now Jeremiah is going to respond to that, and it's an uncomfortable position. I'm sure he's thought about this. He knows that this is eventually he's going to have to give an answer for this, but the answer is lacking. Like in all of his other plagiarism, he's blaming somebody. It was my assistants. They posted a word, they posted a dream, they got it wrong, they didn't give proper attribution. Now he's going to say that he was having conversations with his daughter about the song. And the problem with that is that he says he's never heard of it before.
Title of this morning's message is called The Gift of Manasseh. I've never preached it. I've never heard of it.
I've never preached this. I've never heard about this. So let's listen to his explanation.
Yes, thank you for sharing, love, your analogies. I thought I was getting hit with a spirit of revelation while you were talking, man. That's some good stuff. So I appreciate you being straight to the point as well. Just a little, just quick backstory, and we can talk more about it if you'd like. And I know Morgan and I have talked about this in the past as well. I had a series of dreams that I was talking with about in the car in that season, where the Lord was talking to me about boxing gloves and luggage and baggage and all of that stuff like that. And as we were talking in the car one day, she said, "Dad, I want you to listen to this song about the Manasseh, about all of those kinds of things." And so that's kind of where a lot of that was birthed from, was some of the encounters that I had. And then I think in that particular service, we played that song. Just in talking, I felt like I needed to do a better job bringing the context of kind of where I was from my encounters to that, to then obviously playing that song. So
here Jeremiah is referring to encounter. So in the sermon, he said he had a vision, but now he's saying that he had these dreams and he has these encounters, and there was boxing gloves and there was suitcases. But then he had a conversation with his daughter where she said, "I would like you to hear the song." That is not plausible. That is an insult to our ability to think critically. So in that song and in the intro to the song, and obviously Jeremiah heard the intro to the song and the song itself, there is this vast dialogue about suitcases, about boxing gloves, about the foster kids, everything that Jeremiah shares in his message is it. So again, it's either one of the greatest miracles I've ever seen, or this is another instance where Jeremiah took somebody else's revelation and made it his own. Just want to be clear. I do not believe that he had dreams and that he had encounters where he saw boxing gloves and suitcases apart from what he heard in that introduction. It is not plausible to believe that he had all this information before he then suddenly sees, oh, this pastor has the exact same message.
That's definitely, I wasn't sure. I think at least up to this point, I don't know, maybe there was one other person that had approached me about that. I could just kind of bring her in and let just share a little bit of what we were talking about as a family on the way to school, and then getting some of those pieces together and just kind of how that was birthed. So I definitely felt like I definitely needed to do a better job sharing the context of where that came from. So that's just kind of where it came from, and then where that particular message came out of.
So again, he goes from telling the congregation, "I've never preached on this before, I've never heard about this before," to saying, "Well, actually, I did hear about it. I had discussions with my daughter about it. I guess she found the song." And again, we bleeped out her name because we don't want to bring names of people that don't, particularly minors, into this. But it just doesn't fit. And it would appear at this point that his wife Morgan is concerned that Jeremiah is digging himself in a deeper hole, and so she jumps in to give some cover.
Ultimately, Jeremiah is not a good storyteller. Sometimes I sit and things and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I want to like interject details. And what I think that this has done is helped him realize, okay, I do need to weigh this out. Or because after that sermon, I was like, you didn't even mention that you got that from and you looked up that thing. And he's like, oh yeah. But it's not that big of a deal because his intention of his heart is not. But now that these allegations have been there and he's getting scrutinized, people are like pointing. And for me, or I know Sarah been there a long time. We're like, oh gosh, like because we're so detail oriented that the also don't want him to make big promises, right? Because how many times do we retell a story and the details are a little bit different? I was telling them, like, I've heard you tell that story about meeting, is her name Jessica? Jennifer, her name was something from Cheesecake Factory and what she was studying. Like, we don't really remember all the details because they were 14 years ago. So if you hear that story in multiple sermons, there might be details off. So I want to be careful not over promising that. But I also think because of his prophetic nature, because of his platform, he has to do a better job crediting the source or retelling the story accurately. And that was essentially what's in the letter, as well as like the dream was retold a little bit differently, or it's a bull in a china closet or a bull in a china shop. They're same thing, two different words. That can feel a little nitpicky.
So she's saying that Jeremiah is not a good storyteller. And, when things have been, months and years and decades, you get, and there is truth to that. You only remember things if you keep telling the story. And so if I try and remember something that happened 40 years ago, 20 years ago, yeah, maybe some facts are going to be different. But here's the problem. Jeremiah says, I'd never heard about this. Did he forget that he heard about it? I don't think so. In addition to that, he says, I had a vision. God gave me a vision.
I was in prayer this week for our time together this morning, and the Lord began to give me a vision of a church full of people that had red boxing gloves on, and everybody had a suitcase.
So your daughter told you about this, and then God gave you a vision of the same thing. It doesn't make sense. And let me say this: if you have been accused 4, 5, 6 times of plagiarism, you would think that you would want to go out of your way to be super miduyak, we say in Hebrew, exact, super exact, miduyak. You want to go over your message and you want to make sure, is there anything in here that I got from somebody else that I'm claiming is my own that anybody can be confused about? Like, oh, right, I say I have this vision about the boxing gloves and yeah, but I didn't have a vision. It was my daughter told me because she heard the song. Whew, let's fix. You would just think that somebody who has a history of being accused of plagiarism, if they're innocent, would do everything in their power to make sure that they could not be accused of plagiarism. But he doesn't. He takes the story of Anna Golden and he lies and says, I had a vision. I was praying this week and God gave me this vision. But it wasn't a vision. Lastly, I just want to bring up this point. You might be wondering, why not just give attribution? In other words, it was a good message. From what I understand, I can't hear the whole message because they deleted it. They took it down, and it's too bad they did, because that shows that you're trying to get rid of the evidence. If this were a criminal investigation, and I was a defense attorney, I would be turning to the jury and asking, why did they take down the video? If they've got nothing to hide here, why take down the video? Let people see the evidence, but it's gone. Maybe they'll put it back up. But you might ask yourself, why not just give attribution? Why not just say, wow, I heard this powerful message. It was this young singer named Anna Golden, and she's got this beautiful song about Manasseh. And the title of this message, which is really based on her testimony, is called The Gift of Manasseh. And she talked about how her pastor was preaching, and there was these boxing gloves, and there was a suitcase. Right? Just tell that story. There's a very simple reason why not. Is because again, this is me. This is my hypothesis. I don't know, because Jeremiah and I are not friends. We don't hang out. We don't talk. He has blocked me. He blocked me 2 years ago when he defended Dr. Michael Brown after being implicated by an investigator of sexually abusive misconduct. He blocked me. He quoted me. Some of you may remember he called me a man named Ron Cantor, as if he doesn't know me. But that's another story. It comical. Jeremiah thrives on being a prophet. He is prophet Jeremiah. In fact, if you listen to the video from the guys down at North Georgia Revival, and by the way, I have reached out to the senior leader there, Todd Smith, and in a very kind way, I've said, Todd, these are real issues here. There's a lot, and I listed all things that, friends, that you think I've shared a lot. I have still so much on my computer that people have sent me, and I'm feeling stupid. I'm going to say, I feel like I'm out of my mind posting this stuff, and I'm embarrassed. But I care for these people. When I read these narratives, and they all match. You can't have 25 people going through a very similar experience, and they're all lying. They're all gossipers. They're all slanderers. They're all accusers of the brethren, and you're right. It just cannot be. That goes against, the laws of evidence. That's why the Bible tells us we don't just take the evidence from one person. We look for at least 2 or 3. But now we're talking dozens of testimonies. So I reached out to Todd and I said, Todd, these are really, and I don't know him, but he seems like a nice guy. He seems like a good guy who loves the Lord. I don't know anything about him other than what I saw. And I didn't even finish watching the video of their Zoom call about Jake Cale. I just said, Todd, I think that you're somebody that Jeremiah respects. And I want to share this information with you because I don't want to, honestly, I would prefer not to be doing this. I would rather that qualified leaders come into that situation and judge it honestly and accurately and righteously, and that they minister to the victims. That would be what I would prefer rather than doing this. But Todd wrote me back after, first saying that he would review everything. Then I wrote him back. Wrote him one last time, and he kindly got a hold of me and said, I respectfully decline. So obviously, I don't know why he doesn't want to get involved, or maybe he just doesn't want to get involved with me. But again, trying to do this the right way, trying to reach out through leadership, there's not much more I can do. So I said all that to say that Todd refers to him not merely as Jeremiah or even prophet Jeremiah, but just prophet. That is Jeremiah's identity. He's prophet. But I believe that the reason Jeremiah stole this message from Anna Golden and made it appear that he had a vision is because it's so much awesomer. Is awesomer a word? More awesome? I like awesomer. It is so much awesomer to listen. If I say, you know what, I heard this thing from Anna Golden, her pastor, blah, blah, blah. I had a vision. I was in prayer for you. I had a vision, and in this vision, I saw suitcases and I saw boxing gloves, and the Lord shared that. That is the mystique that Jeremiah thrives on, but it was dishonest. It was dishonest. And so at a certain point, folks, come on, God has given us common sense. One of the things that is greatly lacking in the body right now is critical thinking. Oftentimes, pastors will tell their people, don't believe what you read online. And by the way, don't believe what you read online. A lot of it is nonsense. But when they're saying, don't believe what you're reading about me, I'm not going to adequately deal with these allegations, but don't believe what you're hearing about me. And all those people that have the same testimony about me being abusive or doing XYZ, they're accusers of the friends. You can think on your own. I am a pro-New Testament person, right? I believe the Bible tells us to honor leadership. It says that we're to respect elders, particularly those that teach and preach. They're worthy of double honor, right? So I believe in that. I believe, and I want to honor those and I want to honor leadership as much as I'm able to. I want to honor leadership, but that does not mean that you cannot think critically. That does not mean that you cannot disagree. In fact, we probably have the most intelligent lay community in world history because of the availability of knowledge. Now, I know there's a lot of nonsense on there. I see people send me stuff every day that if you just read it, it's not true. Well, I would hope that they would know it's not true. But when it comes to these situations, you are allowed to think about it. And you know what else you're allowed to do is to talk to other people in the congregation about it. I don't mean gossip-wise. I mean, guys, what do we make of this? Is this real? Is this true? There's a lot of evidence. It is okay. If people are saying, no, you can't, it's wrong. I'm going to tell you a story. There was a guy named Stanley Milgram, and he wanted to test a hypothesis. And so what he did, I think it was part of Yale University, and he wanted to see how far people would go in obeying authority. So what he did is he got volunteers, and in a room you would have a person who was a actor, and then you would have another person who's an actor, but he would pretend to be a doctor. So you got one person sitting down, actor, and then you've got a doctor who is an actor. And then the volunteer would come in, and the doctor, he's wearing a white lab coat, which symbolizes what? Authority. I'm in charge. I'm the boss. You can trust me, right? You walk into a doctor's office and he says strip, and you strip. I mean, that you wouldn't do that for the plumber. I hope you wouldn't do it for the plumber, because that's not why you don't trust a plumber. Now, if the plumber wants to look at your pipes as in underneath your kitchen sink, you let him do that. You would not let the doctor there. But the doctor says strip, you strip, because you trust him. And so researcher Stanley Milgram of Yale University, he wanted to do a test. He wanted to see how far people would go to obey authority with the background of the Holocaust, where you had good German people suddenly doing atrocities, saying, well, I was just obeying orders. He wanted to see how far people would go. So he does this experiment where two people come in, and then one person would be the teacher and the other one would be the pupil. And so and they're volunteers, and they, one goes into one room, one goes in the other room, and then the scientist would come out, and he would have a white lab jacket on, and he was the one in charge. And the teacher was to ask the pupil questions. And he's strapped up to electric weird stuff. And so, to give him shock. And so each time he got a wrong answer, there would be a voltage shock. What the teacher did not know is that the pupil, the student, was actually an actor, and he wasn't actually being shocked. And so each time he would be shocked, there would be a physical response.
Experiment, that's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right on.
I refuse to go on. Let me out.
You refuse to go on? The experiment requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
And every time he got a wrong answer, the professor, again, everybody's an actor here except for the person turning up the voltage, he would say, turn up the voltage. And the number of people that turned it up to a deathly amount of voltage was shocking. And so what would happen is that if the teacher would say, wait, I can't do this, it's going to hurt him, it's too much, the professor would say, the experiment requires that you turn up the voltage. And then they would do it.
Oh. I can't stand the pain. Let me out of here.
Can't stand it. I'm not going to kill that man, eh? I mean, who's going to take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman?
I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please.
All right, next one, slow.
The guy in the other room would be screaming. And so the actor might say something like, I can't stand this. This is too much. I'm going to die. I can't take the pain. In the end, the experiment proved that 2/3 of the volunteers were willing to administer a lethal shock when they were told to by an authority figure. So again, I am all for obeying authority. I am all for honoring elders, but as congregants, you have a brain. You can think for yourself. You're not guilty. And if anyone is making you feel that you're evil or that you are guilty or that you are a gossiper because you were genuinely wanting to know if your pastor is guilty of lying, guilty of plagiarism, guilty of pushing people out. And Jeremiah says in this Zoom call that there are people accusing him of having visions that would encourage people to leave the congregation that he didn't want there, and they're accusing him. He said, I never did that.
Who have we manipulated with prophecy or whatever? And again, obviously, sometimes just being completely transparent, like past members are making YouTube videos about, I gave him a dream. I have the text messages. I never gave him a dream. I mean, there's just so many things that I'm like, even worth my time. And a lot of these people that leave that just lie, flat out lie, and we have the receipts, but I just let it go.
I reached out to Mindy and Nathan Sanford, and this is what they sent me. And this I'm going to read you. This is Jeremiah writing them. Good morning. Could you meet me tomorrow at 10:15 a.m.? I had an open vision of you on Sunday at church that I sensed is very significant. I have wrestled in prayer and fasting this week regarding the timing of sharing it with you and believe I need to do it now. I believe that Mindy should come if possible as well. Let me know. And in that open vision, I can't remember the details, but the interpretation was that it's time for you to move on because apparently Nathan had become a threat because he is very pastoral and had been using that pastoral gift, and that was a threat to Jeremiah, allegedly. But here it is, text message. I had an open vision. Jeremiah telling his 30 leaders on February 4th, that never happened. So who should we believe, Jeremiah? Or should we believe Jeremiah? I do understand that in that recording, he said that he never had a dream, and he actually wrote to them that he had an open vision. That is really just semantics. When he's saying that he didn't have a dream, he's saying, I did not have supernatural revelation that people were supposed to leave the congregation. I don't think there was a difference between dream or vision other than maybe him trying to say technically, I'm telling the truth. But according to the text, he received supernatural revelation that according to the interpretation, his interpretation, Nathan and Mindy needed to leave the congregation. Okay, that is all I'm going to share today. I do want to encourage you, think for yourself. No matter who you are, what congregation you're in, I would say that to the people in my congregation in Tel Aviv. Think for yourself. And if you have questions, about anything that I've done or any of the pastors have done, free to come and share. Let's sit down. Let's talk. No reason to be defensive. It's the Lord's work. I'm not building my kingdom here. We're building the kingdom of God. And so if I did something as a pastor that I hurt someone, just yesterday, somebody rebuked me online. They reminded me of something that I wrote that was tongue in cheek in response to somebody else's text, probably a week or 2 weeks ago. And I said to them, you know what? That was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. I was being cute. I was being tongue in cheek, but for other people watching, it would come across as arrogant. And I repented. What? That's healthy. That's good. What do I need to block that guy? Do I need to delete that? I can't let him tell people that I did something wrong. Or maybe it's just healthier to say, yeah, I did that. That was wrong. I'm sorry. So God bless you. Tonight's Passover here in Israel. I don't know if I'll get this video out today, but we bless you and talk to you next time.